Thank you so much for coming to tonight's call to action program, The SNCC Experience in Dallas. I'm NICOLA Longford, the Executive Director here of the Sixth Floor Museum. And since May, when the museum launched the Call to Action series, we've been greatly rewarded by the public response and inspired by the extraordinary histories our speakers have shared in this room. Tonight we have the amazing opportunity to hear the first-hand accounts about Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee from those who are active in the local chapter here in Dallas. And it's a great pleasure to introduce tonight's panel. Before I introduce our guests, I do want to say that we're going to be having some visitors trickle in, so I hope that they will be accommodated easily at the back. But we expect to have a full house this evening. Now I would like to introduce Edward Harris, who has 30 years of experience in economic development and housing issues, including his work for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Prior to joining HUD, he headed the Texas Federation of Housing Counselors and West Dallas Neighborhood Development Corporation. The Reverend Bishop Mark HERBENER is the retired bishop. He's a retired bishop of the Northern Texas, Northern Louisiana Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. He was pastor of Mount Olive Lutheran Church for 26 years and has been a tireless community leader, serving organizations such as the Greater Dallas Community Relations Commission. Dallas native and veteran human rights activist Ernest McMillan worked with SNCC throughout the 60s in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. He is founder and executive director of the Fifth Ward Enrichment Program in Houston, a program that promotes the positive development of high-risk inner-city boys. Moderating what promises to be a fascinating discussion is one of the state's most respected journalists, Bobby Ray Sanders.
Go back to that.
Bob Ray's journalism career, which spans over 3 decades in TV, newspaper, and radio, began at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, where he is currently vice president and associate editor. He is active in numerous professional and community organizations and is the professional in residence in the Texas Christian University Journalism Department. His many honors and awards include 5 Katies from the Dallas Press Club, a regional Emmy, and a national headliner award. Please join me in welcoming tonight's distinguished panel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, got that mic off. Mine is on, right? Listen, we're going to have fun tonight. We're going to reminisce. We're going to go back to the old days, which I can't help but go back to because I'm old now. But as you know, we all know each other here, and I'm looking out in this audience, and I know a lot of you out here, and I'm going to try to get to you as quickly as possible, but I'm going to hog the show for a little bit, if you don't mind. Because I did some research. And I wouldn't tell them what I'd done, but we're just going to go back but believe me, I'll get to you as quickly as possible. And at that time, I'm going to play Oprah. Except I'm not going to cry.
Promise?
I'll come to the audience when you have questions or comments, if you want to. But let's get started, really. I want to go back 45 years, just 45 years. 1961, I think it was, Edward. 1961, that's the year John Kennedy became president of the United States. But all of you were active in Dallas. And Mark, I'm going to start with you because I think that's the year you became pastor of a church in South Dallas.
Yes.
Now, you're on, or you will be. But in 3 to 4 sentences, I don't want a long answer. I'm going to ask each of you, starting with Mark. What was Dallas like in 1961?
For me, partly, I didn't know, and that's the truth, because I'd been in Richardson, and what I saw was the absolute lack of opportunity within the African American community, for sure, in South Dallas. It was just. I know that one of the things I came was that when I came to South Dallas, the question is, what do you see as being the problem? And that was the answer that I gave, is that there is no opportunity for black people to have a voice. It's just quiet.
No opportunity.
It was silent.
Okay.
And I remember someone telling me at the time, and I agreed with that, that the black community was forced to be living 30 years into the past.
Mark, I'm going to ask you to pull your mic up just a little bit, just to
Yeah.
make sure that we get it. Oh, look at it. Just pull it up. Yeah, there you go. Now,
I'll fix it better.
he's got to make noise. He's a preacher. He can't. He's waiting on an amen, I think.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Now, Edward, I know you and Ernie grew up in Dallas.
Yes.
Go back to 1961 or 45 years or so, or thereabouts. How would you describe Dallas in 3 or 4 sentences?
Well, as a young man in Dallas, I came up in a family of 6. My father's an entrepreneur. So, as a family and as an individual, we didn't experience a lot of first-hand racism like somebody who may have had to go to a job. Because we always were in a position where we worked for my father, and I don't think anything can surpass an entrepreneurial spirit, within a family. Right. It helps strengthen it.
Now, you're not telling us you didn't realize there was segregation.
Yes,
Or
I
are
am.
you?
Yes, I am.
I thought that's where you were going.
Clarification. And the reason for that is, I don't think, if you've never had that personal experience, you don't really know how to define discrimination if you've never been discriminated against. But as I got older, and as we got out of the house and went to high school and started interacting with the other community, we realized that there was some differences. As long as I was in South Dallas, I had an arc of safety.
Yes.
Family members, large family, very large family, extended family also. So never had those experiences. But over time, as we began to venture off Trunk, and what was Forest Avenue and some other streets, and when you get slapped with the N-word, or where are you going? Even at Fair Park. You remember that experience? You remember that experience. Young black men love basketball, so we were at the automobile building, we heard a ball bouncing. And so we scraped that paint off the window to see what was going on. And you remember this story, right? And the park police came and said, hey, what are you hands doing there? And get your ass out of here. And, he said, but what's going on in here? It was Dallas Park and Rec in my neighborhood. But we had to walk from Trunk to what's now St. Philip School Gym, or X-Line, or through Mount Olive Lutheran Church, and get a ride. What was it, 8 or 10 of us in a Volkswagen Beetle? Yellow. Looked like something off the Cosby Kids, all right? Seriously. But to answer your question, never had that experience until we started really getting outside of the community, other than the local merchants. We're going to get to some of that. Yeah. And so they were kind of like targets for us, that was the only source we had, the insurance man, right. The local grocer. But I didn't really have that experience as a kid until I actually came downtown Dallas. I got out of that arc of safety that I had in South Dallas. Saw a lot of brutality as a kid, but never experienced it as a youngster. That came maybe 19, 20, 21. And that's when we experienced the real deal. So I know what it's like to get your butt whooped and be threatened.
Okay, now I just got to say, I noticed you bleep black, but you didn't bleep ass. But we'll move on.
That's okay.
I'm paying attention. No. You can say anything you want to.
I can incite.
But
that's not my role here tonight.
You can say anything you want.
I know how to incite.
Ernest McMillan.
Yeah, 1961, that represented for me in my life last few years of me living in a cocoon, a real nurturing, warm, womb-like existence, because North Dallas, where I grew up, which now they call it, I guess North Dallas goes all the way to Oklahoma now.
Yeah, you better explain. Explain North Dallas. Explain North Dallas.
Uptown.
Yeah, you
West
call it
Village.
short North Dallas now, I think. But Hall Street, Thomas area, just in the shadow, downtown Dallas. That was one of stable black community. And I grew up in a neighborhood where you had the NAACP, you had Booker T. Washington High School, St. Paul United Methodist Church, the businesses there, the library. Library was there, the Bethlehem
State-
Center was there,
State
the
Theater.
YMCA, the State Theater. You know, you had the food, the cabs, the cars, everything right there. So I was in a community that was the school, and all that was right there. So there was no need to even venture forth from that neighborhood. And so 2 or 3 years later, you asked about that, it was a whole different experience. But right then and there, although we had the segregated buses, we had color-only signs and white-only signs, and we had all-white police, all-white jurors, we had poll tax, things like that. We were buffered from those things in a large way by an extended family and a nuclear family that nurtured us, cared for us, that made our home a center for safety, a haven for people to get together. And so it was a nurturing kind of environment. In fact, I was a part of an organization in my high school junior year, sophomore year, that was giving out food baskets to the poor. You know, and so I found a food basket on my porch. And I didn't, wait a minute, you know, I said, we didn't understand, I didn't feel poverty, I didn't feel needy, in those sense, because we had security, love, caring people around us, the neighbors, the family, all of that was a part of my growing up in those days in Black Dallas.
Okay, like now, Mark, I want to come back to you because you came from someplace else, as you said, when you came to Richardson, which had to be an experience in itself.
Yeah.
How did it feel? And you quickly became sort of like an honorary Negro. And I don't mean that. I mean, people sort of accepted you. But how did you feel coming to a predominantly African American congregation? And do you think that you were resented to some degree by those people in downtown Dallas, that you were representing these folk in Black Dallas?
I had no idea what people downtown might have been thinking. I felt like I was coming home because I was raised in Chicago, and actually I was raised in a terribly segregated part of Chicago. But at the same time, it was a real part. There were the kind of the thing you described as a cocoon. I was raised in a German ghetto in Chicago. And, you know, walking down the sidewalks in South Dallas was just like walking down the sidewalks at home. You know, and there were people on the porches and talking to each other and neighbors and all of that stuff. So in a real sense, it was like coming home. Richardson...
That's north of here.
let me put it this way.
You don't have to bleep anything, just say it.
Our daughter can credit the fact that we were moving to South Dallas for being born. Because Donna said she wasn't going to have any more kids in Richardson. Did I get it right?
In more ways than one.
Donna's saying amen to that. Okay, let's go back. Things, 61 cocoon feeling for you who grew up black in here. It changed rather quickly. Why was there a need for a SNCC, and how did it come about, or what happened that you needed a SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee? Ernie.
I think we were pressing at the limits. We were confined in this community, so we were restricted so severely that movement, education, economic development, all those things were, the ceiling was very, very low and restricted. So we were bursting at the seams, in a sense, spiritually, emotionally, physically, in our housing and all of that. So I'm not trying to describe a utopian community that we lived in, because there was little petty crime and all those kind of things, alcoholics and abusers and things like that. But overwhelmingly we felt safe. But there was a yearning for more, and a yearning for a confident life that didn't restrict you from voting or from running for office or for owning a business, those kind of things, because we had an all-white city council, we had an all-white jury system, all-white police force, you know, so we're beginning to challenge those things. I was fortunate to have a family, for example, my uncle Clifton was a founder of the Progressive Voter League, and my uncle Cecil was a teacher in high school, and I had an uncle that was a principal of high school, so they would share with us their experiences, you know, fighting for freedom, fighting for self-determination. And so it was kind of a spark that we got from there, and just seeing how people were being mistreated. I think one of the biggest eye-openers was the Emmett Till murder. And maybe before that with the Arkansas school desegregation. Those kind of things we were feeling that, we can identify with that. So I think that was the urgency there, that you had those kind of horrors, this kind of terrorism taking place in our country, right down the street. And we had people here who were innocent of capital crimes, but electrocuted. You know, so people, that was injustice we felt. I'm not trying to say we were just so happy little slaves running around on Hall Street in Allen. No, but we felt it more and more as we grew into maturity, into young men beginning to say, we need to branch out, become men in our community, represent ourselves, get an education, move on. And I was a graduate from Booker T. Washington, going to Morehouse College, and I ran smack into the movement there. That was the headquarters for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and it was also a beehive of activity. I think the governor of Georgia was Mr. Lomax, but then he was running a restaurant that was beating people up with axe handles before he became governor. Lester Maddox. Thank you. Did I say what I said?
Lester to my Lester.
Thank you. But so we started demonstrating against the March on Washington, inspired people, King's eloquence, speaking, and our own desires. Those things coupled together, I think, sparked and showed we needed to do more.
In fact, as I recall, Lester Maddox had a chicken shack, basically. And can you imagine I want to sell chicken and fried? I mean, never mind.
Don't go there.
But Edward, I mean, to pick up on where Ernie left off, I mean, there were some people, including black people in Dallas, who thought that people your age who were getting involved in SNCC, the Black Panthers that would come along a little bit later, that y'all were just doing something. You didn't know what you were doing. You were just doing something. You didn't care about a movement. You didn't care about. I mean, there were people who thought that. Were they wrong?
No, they were not wrong. I think that I'll speak about my experience. I have a twin brother, and we used to have these match handles. You know, our aliases, our AKAs. My friend Mr. Maddox with the Daily
Show. Tell us those AKAs now.
Well, you know, it's okay, baby. You can, you know, I got my white flag out. You could. And I was telling Ernest earlier, just angry young black men. I think that even today, like back then, there was just certain incidents with me, stuff that would just infuriate me about the treatment of African Americans in this town, my hometown. And so, a young black man in the inner city, and I'll say even today, a lot of the targets, a lot of that frustration and anger are people who are in control and in power. So a lot of my anger was targeted at them. And have I robbed? Yeah. Have I assaulted? Yeah.
Have you gone to jail?
Have I what?
Do you even know how many times, Edward?
I'm here today because of Mark Herbener. Mark Herbener kept me from being a 3-time loser. Seriously.
Okay.
Because I was one of those young men that lived a few blocks from Mount Olive, and other than at home, this was safe refuge. I mean, they could be on our ass. And if we made it to that door with Audrey Lynn and Mark Herbener, you know, this is one white guy telling another white guy, these boys are right there, you know, part of Mount Olive. You can stop right there. And we'd be behind going like, whoa, because we knew we were on our way to Dallas County Juvenile or who knows what else.
To the bayou.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Yeah. I was sitting over my girlfriend's house and I saw the TV program where you were on this panel. And one of the police officers on there, and I don't even remember what this was all about. It may have been right after the Emmett Till shooting. And I was so inspired by him on TV and what he had to say and how he was handling himself and standing up and being a man and setting an example. I told my brother, I said, hell, we're going to find him. Because he's talking about something that I can identify with. You know, because I was pretty hostile young man, my brother and I. And everything you've heard about us is true. We will clock you if, you know.
I mean, since you brought up the handle for you and your brother,
yeah.
What were y'all called?
I was twins. I was called Blackhead, and he was called Niggerhead. That's right. You can laugh if you want to.
Okay.
Back then they weren't laughing, trying to stay out of the way. But you know, when you start identifying with a radical movement and you take on the title or role of being an activist, the first people to reject you is your own. And that happened in my mama's house. But that was not going to discourage me, you know, because that's when I got my first cousin, Charles Beasley. Some of you probably know this to be Easily. He said, oh, sure. And then so I went to the Snake House where I felt safe with Charles, believe it or not. And we went to the Snake House and I met Ernest. And one thing that I was also moved by, we were required to read. So that part about knowing what we were doing, it was a learning process for us also. Because this was the most experienced guy, you know, in the group. But stopped us from acting silly, being buffoons, going out, you know, practicing racism ourselves against other folk. But just read, required reading. Know what you're talking about. Know about this movement. Know about the sacrifices that your grandparents and your great-grandparents and other people made. Know about the sacrifices some white people may have made. I'm not mad at people like John Brown. I'm not mad at people like Mary Green. I'm not mad at Mark Herbener or his wife. I'm talking people who step up. Talk is cheap, performance costs.
Well, just for the record, though, where was the Snake House, Ernie?
We had several. I think the first one was on South Boulevard, 2500 block near what was then was Oakland, and then we moved later on to
Peabody, yeah.
And then we had several. But then we had a West Dallas at one point.
And Mark, where was Mount Olive?
Yep.
Where was it?
Mount Olive on Martin Luther King now and Meadow.
Okay, and I understand the basement of that building was pretty important.
Well, the basement was used by SNCC and Welfare Rights Organization, BCJLO, and
What's a BCJLO?
Black Citizens for Justice, Law and Order.
You tell me, boy, you got to go.
Okay, I should mention some names. Edwin Washington.
Yeah, definitely.
And others, but you know, it was used. I mean, there were so many meetings that were in that basement, and
That's where I learned to use a mimeograph machine. I couldn't spell it,
that
but I know how to use it.
That was the most radical mimeograph machine. There was more stuff cranked out on that mimeograph machine.
That's right.
Okay, now the people, you know, downtown knew you existed. You made sure they knew you existed. My sense was that there were informants for downtown. There were infiltrators into SNCC. Were there? Okay. I guess somebody's saying yes out in the audience. So, Ernie, I mean, did you know who they were then? Were they easily identifiable?
Well, we knew a couple, and we could let them know we knew they were watching us. And we had others, you know, just in plain uniform who would harass us. You know, there were others without uniform. And there were some we were shocked to find out they were there on the payroll later on. So we had all different shades. But just to go back to your original question, basically, we didn't know what we were doing. We were acting on an instinct. We were acting on a gut feeling. We were acting on now. You know, we weren't anti-intellectual. We weren't putting down the Robesons and the Du Bois and the Booker T. Washington. That we learned and studied, but there was really no mentorship for us. We were in a virgin new territory, and so we were stepping out, feeling invincible in a sense. I guess some people say youth is wasted on the youth. You know, and it was true that saying, but it really wasn't wasted on that go around, because we really acted, and it was something not just with SNCC, but wherever you were, whatever you were doing, whatever walk of life you were in, there was some corresponding force or corresponding convergence with what we were doing. If you were a musical artist, you were singing songs, let's get going, let's get moving, people get ready, you know, we shall overcome. We had that fuel of culture to support us. If you were an artist, you were drawing fists on the walls in protest. You know, or if you were in prison, you know, these are brothers in prison locked down who were going on strike during the 60s. We had, if you were a police officer, you still did a role and helped us. I can't confess to those things, but there were some things we had black cops were doing to support the movement. If you were a black attorney, if you were a nurse, if you were getting blood to drug dealers on the corner and they were selling their blood for money to get drugs, you became a part of the movement too. So I mean, whatever walk of life, you were in the church, whatever life, you were a student on a college campus, everybody had a role to play. SNCC was one part of this whole movement. I want to say it was a movement. We don't have that sense. We have a spark of it every now and then, but there was a movement, a feeling that just kind of captured people. It made them move. And I want to say, too, there was a young man by the name of, we call him Quasi, Donald Ray Williams, who was a butcher, coming home from work, he saw a demonstration on Oakland Avenue, now Malcolm X, got off the bus, he never got back on to that job. He became a part of it. We had ex-Vietnam veterans who became a part of the movement, who became our military wing, unquote, unquote. You know, so we had whatever form, whatever life you had, whatever your talent was, whatever your calling was, there was a role you could play.
Okay, but now Mark, and I want to come back to Vietnam too, and to protests that we haven't really gotten to. How did the congregation? This was a pretty, I would say, moderate.
It was a middle-class black congregation. Yes.
So how did they react to you having the SNCC people, Ernie and all these folk, in the basement?
Well,
I mean, would it be like rats in the basement, or what?
They voted for it. I mean, if you take this to our council, the council would say yes. And they didn't want to have they voted down by a 5-4 vote having the Black Panther breakfast. That one they voted down.
But you ended up starting a food pantry, right?
Yeah.
The first one in Dallas, I think.
Yes. Well, and the other parts, I remember this one man who was, and Jim came to me and says, you know, you're driving away the members of this church with all this radical stuff and the SNCCs. And you knew this guy because he was always around and fussing at you. And so I said,
What was his name, Mark?
Jim. He's gone now. Jim Sorrells.
Oh, okay, I know. Okay, so
Yeah.
You know Mr. Sorrells?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just a character. And anyway, you drive, and I said, name one. And he said, well, so-and-so. She doesn't come to church anymore because of you. So I said, okay, so I went to see her. And what she said was, you know, I've got some personal problems right now, and I've got to work those things out. Once I work them out, I'll be back at church. But the thing is, I am so proud of what you're doing with the folks like SNCC and in the basement. I said, wow, that's it.
Okay.
She was a teacher in the public schools, and is just as fine a person as you can find.
Now, Edward, you mentioned, well, actually, Ernest mentioned Vietnam, and SNCC was anti-Vietnam, as I recall.
Yes.
But you ended up, after fighting the draft board all those years, didn't you end up volunteering?
Yes, I did.
Flip the
Why
script.
don't you explain that to us?
I heard you mention TCU. That means you can count.
Yeah, right.
10 years, 2 years. Okay? Mine is a long story, so I'm not going to get...
Yeah, abbreviated for us.
Not a problem.
But 10 years, 2 years. We
If
sort of got
there's
the
anybody in the audience that's related to Helen Bush, she was the secretary of the Selective Service Board here in Dallas. I want to apologize to Helen and her relatives, because it was my job to make sure that she didn't have a restful day at all. And she was telling me I couldn't come in the center and certain things I couldn't do. Well, SNCC had an African name for the resistance. You remember what that was? Because that was my role, you know. I had to go down and I was passing out the card, you know, letting you know about your rights. I got drafted. Muhammad Ali was 67, 68. Drafted age in the state of Texas. What the hell was I doing? I don't know. But anyway, I said I wasn't going. I said, I'll tell you what, train me, send me to Alabama. Train me, send me to Mississippi. But don't train me and send me to somebody who don't even know how to pronounce my name, knows nothing about me. I can turn on the TV and pick up the newspaper and see what America is heaping on me. So when I went to, I did not step forward. That's when I made my, we left here, not you and I together, but yeah, I've been, let me say I had to leave and go outside the borders of the U.S. And I was sitting at Charles Beasley's trial when there was two guys in nice suits. Any FBI in here tonight? I know you're here, but it's okay. You're welcome. Anyway, and I'm sitting there, and I looked over, and I spotted these two guys, you know, with the tablets and suits on, and they were constantly taking notes and looking at me and kind of nodding, and I nodded back. But that was them. They came all across the border, monitoring Charles, and saw me there, but nothing they could do. So when I finally made it back, Ed Polk was my attorney. Ed Polk was all of our attorney during that time, because nobody else wanted to touch us. No minister, no lawyer, no school principal, and in some cases, sometimes your own folks, okay? And that's what we were confronted with as young men. I decided I wasn't going. So when I left the country, it got kind of cold up there, man. I came back. And when I got to town, before I could call, I called Ed Polk. He said, well, they came back here yesterday. They know you back in town. So how the hell would they know that? But they knew I was back in town. The U.S. Attorney wanted me to come downtown and talk with him. And the guys at the barbershop verified it. Bring his ass out to South Dallas. Tell him I'll be at 2612 Martin Luther King Jr., Forest Avenue, and that's where he can find me. I eventually went on downtown and talked to him, you know. No, they didn't come, never did come out, though. Never did come out. I went downtown and I talked to him, you know, and I don't know why I thought I could intimidate a U.S. attorney, but I tried. I did. And I left there, and Clarence Hugh Guinea was running for council. You remember how long ago that was? Hugh Guinea was an engineer at Texas Instrument. He was running for Dallas City Council when the American Party was very strong. That was the part of the late Governor George Wallace. And so when the attorneys came to get us, and God bless DeVille Ranger and C.B. Bunkley and L.A. Bedford, because those were the guys that would come and get us. Everybody else was either busy or the phone was busy or they were out of town. I didn't have, you know, don't get me involved with these guys, you know. So everybody got out but me. I said, oh, hell, what's going on here? And then the suits came in again. They said, well, you know, you seem like a pretty smart guy. Why are you hanging with the likes of, you know, guys like this guy? And I said, well, you know, that's a good question, but let me ask you about some of the company you keep. Is it true what they say? Yes, it is. I said, is it true what they say about Mr. Hoover? Is he really, you know, he slammed the book, you know, and walked out. You know, I didn't make bond. You know, they took me on to the county. Well, Miss Helen, they took me to the county, and then as soon as they made the bond for the state bond, then they put me in the Fed piece. You asked them about, okay, that's what it leads up to. So I got out, and that's when we had the big shoving match down at the old federal building.
Yeah.
Commerce. Yeah. No, not the one on Commerce. There was another old one. Yeah. We used to be an old post office too there. Not Houston Street, not any of that. This was closer to St. Paul, Harwood.
Okay.
You know, so it was a big shoving match, you know, and they made my bond. I got out, and Betty and I, Dr. Poindexter just passed last week too, down in Prairie View. I was married to Dr. Poindexter's daughter, one of the sharpest black women in this state. Not because she married me, but she was a very intelligent lady.
Slipped up on that one.
Yeah. And Poindexter helped get me out, and we went to Austin. I had to go to San Antonio. They locked me up again, and what did they tell me? Oh. They said that I had, it was something psychologically wrong with me. No. Seriously. And this is a good,
they were right.
And you guys define this for me. Hypersensitivity to racial discrimination. I said, does that mean going off when somebody's got their foot in your behind? Is that what that means? What does that mean? Hypersensitivity to racial discrimination. And any of you that, and my undergraduate in criminal justice, so anybody that knows anything about criminal justice, once you get the P number, they can keep you there forever, and you never have to go to trial. So all the other inmates were asking me, he said, what are you in this? Man, you better get out of here. He said, you see that guy? He's been in here 30 years. I said, for what? Nothing. You know?
Sort of like it is today.
Yeah.
Well, but go ahead.
And I said, I don't need this P number to be here with these guys. So those, you know, and the way they treated me up there, when I came out, you know, I was saying about they had this big scar on my head, and they had me, for those who don't know what manacles are, those are the cuffs that go. You know what they are, right? Yeah. Those are the ones that go on your ankle. In that belly chain. They marched me from the San Antonio Federal Building straight down the street with all those chains on, with that big scar of about 10 sutures, you know, on the side of my head, and walked me into the induction center. So all these 18 and 19-year-olds are standing there. When they saw me come in with this big scar, all these U.S. Marshals, yeah, and they dropped the chains on the floor. You know how they do effect, like they slam the door? You know, when they slam the door for effect? That's why they dropped those chains, and all them youngsters kind of went like, hell, I'm not going anywhere. Who's this guy? But that's how I volunteered for the draft, because the U.S. attorney came to my cell the day before and said, I'm going to give you 10 years. And
you took 2 in the service.
He didn't like that at all. I had a visiting judge. And I got off, and the whole time I spent in the military, it wasn't a bad experience. It was a pretty decent experience, and I made a lot of good friends. But I kept doing what I was doing. I think what God put me here to do. The whole time I was in the service, I was seizing buildings and acting a fool and bringing issues to the front. Because when I got there, they were just pushing black soldiers out. You know, general discharge, less than honorable condition.
Hey, hold on just a minute, because I want to get, he's preaching now. But Ernie, I want to get to your experience, because you're one of the first ones that I remember being really falsely accused. Tell me how you went to prison, the protest that led to your incarceration.
Okay. I had been working in the South and misdemeanor charges for voting rights protests and so forth. But coming to Dallas in the midst of the Black Power movement, things became serious in terms of felony charges based on a demonstration we had in South Dallas. We had several mass meetings throughout the neighborhood, several churches, and we asked the community what was some of the major problems, and beginning to prioritize those problems. The number one that came during that series of mass meetings was economic exploitation through stores. And so we took that issue and we put a plan together to have an effect on it. How can we change it? So we identified a chain of stores. There were 10 of them called the OK Supermarket. And I think 9 of those 10 stores were all in South Dallas, Southeast Dallas, and around. Maybe one was somewhere else. But 9 out of 10 of them were in South Dallas, in the black community. And we decided that this store was really an example of how not to do business in the community, because they were selling ungraded meat to the community. They were selling poor condition of vegetables and fruits. They was charging high prices for those things at the same. There wasn't a supermarket in South Dallas at that time. We had these little stores, these little fast market, little retail shops like that were serving as supermarkets or grocery stores. And so charging high exorbitant prices for a dozen eggs and then watermelon and things like just ordinary food that were the price you would find at a 7-Eleven today. For stores you should find half that price in a regular store. So we chose that supermarket and we launched a protest at the one on Pine Street. And at the time, we felt that putting the signs and march around the store didn't fit right with us. You know,
that wasn't enough.
That wouldn't wake up the community. That wouldn't really get the message across about our anger and our discontent with how they were treating our people. So we went inside the store, and we went inside the store to just cause a little headache for them. But the headache became a serious migraine for them because we did something that we didn't really plan on doing. And that was, it got carried away. There were some goods that were damaged. The intent was to go into the store.
I was going to say, the idea of the protest was to go in and order something and basically not buy it.
Not
say you don't want
out, or just order some meat cut a special way. And then when they would butcher it up and everything, we said, oh, that's right, I changed my mind. Or, you know, to take ice cream to the counter and say, leave it there and walk out the store. There wasn't anybody stealing or any plans for any of those kind of damaging to do, but just to tie them up and harass them and see that, look, we can create some problems for you. But they got carried away. There were some eggs dropped, some tomatoes smashed. And I think even the court said there was about $200 worth of damage. So a minuscule amount of damage was done, but that was translated into a felony offense when Matthew Johnson and myself were charged as the principals in the the malicious destruction of private property.
Over $50.
Over $50.
And
that carried up to a 20-year sentence. So I was charged with that and sentenced to 10 years for that offense, because I was considered the principal and responsible for the $200 worth of damage done. So it amounted to, $2 for every year served.
And how many years did you serve?
3 years and 2 weeks.
Now, I remember when you got out of prison, and you came back and you started doing some of the same thing. I mean, not going to the stores, but I mean, you were still organizing.
I was shopping the stores.
But I remember you organizing, and tell me this, and then audience I'm coming to you. I apologize for hogging it as long as I did. I said I wasn't going to do it. But aren't they interesting, though? Yeah. I mean, they got stories to tell. I didn't want to stop. I tell people this story, and people don't believe me, and I don't have the film anymore. But I can remember one day being put in the back of a car blindfolded, going to meet Angela Davis in Dallas. Now, am I remembering that right? I mean, was Angela Davis in Dallas? Yes. Oh, we got some witnesses. So I'm not crazy.
How did Geronimo Pratt and a lot of other people?
How did Angela Davis get to Dallas? Do you remember?
She came many times. She would speak at SMU University. She would speak to. She would use the time to speak to the university or the fees they paid to speak to the university to come into the community and meet community folks as well. So it wasn't just utilizing that college, university, ivory tower approach. She would be financed legitimately for honorarium and travel support to do the nice little meetings and teas and things, but get out to the community and meet with the folks.
And finally, did the Black Panther Party work with SNCC at all?
At one time, SNCC and the Black Panther Party merged together as one.
I was going to say, it was some of the same members, weren't they? I mean, basically.
Well, you know, for example, Hewitt P. Newton was the chair, and Stokely Carmichael was the chair of the, Kwame Ture was the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinator. He became maybe the prime minister, and he has a brother who was over the communications, the minister of communications. So they found a way to.
Was it Emory?
No, it wasn't Emory. The brother who went to Algiers became the minister. Yeah.
Eldridge. Yeah.
So we had, it was a merging of positions and all that too.
Okay. And Mark, let me just ask you before I go to the audience. I mean, I'm thinking about all of these times we have the tri-ethnic this and the, interfaith that and all of this. Did any of those groups do anything?
Well, they didn't invite us, but
I mean, because you were part of a lot of them.
That was all. It was all front. It was the idea that that's how we could convince people we were doing something, and there was nothing happening. I mean, the tri-ethnic committee or this where we sit down and bring in half a dozen preachers from South Dallas and half a dozen preachers from North Dallas and didn't do anything because they weren't ever talking to the people.
And Ernie, I said one last thing. Of all the people, I mean, all of you, both of you particularly, could have a reason to hate. And I go back especially to, I remember how angry the people were when you got that 10-year sentence. Is there anybody you hate over that incident?
No, I don't hate anyone. It's part of the price you pay for being a part of the community and contributing to what you feel is God's calling for you. It's nothing personal. It's being able to do what you need to do, and you be ready. You're ready for the consequences, or you try to be ready for the consequences. And you're lonely at times, you're hurt at times, you're in pain, you get angry at times. Those emotions are part of everyone that's human, but it's not something carrying me forward or carrying me back or eating up inside of me. I let go of those things and try to learn from them and find a way to turn them into a tool to use for channeling my energy for something constructive and something positive. So it's not that thing. And I want to say, for example, we did a lot of things, but when we started talking about economic control of South Dallas, ownership of the OK Supermarket, not just boycotting the OK Supermarket. When we went down into the welfare office and we organized welfare rights organization and talked to people about how to set up your own sewing shops and do piecemeal work, build your own businesses. We went to the Trinity River Valley Association and started talking about you can't use this land and take it from black people to use it as a turnaround basin. That's when things heated up to the point where they said, you gotta go. So it was while we were dallying around with things on the surface or piddling around with just the idea of a boycott or a police patrol. Police patrol was kind of dangerous for them too because we carried 30 caliber M1 carbines and 12 gauge shotguns following the police. So when you did those kinds of things and took that picture when they were trying to arrest a young woman or a young man on the street, or when you had a young man corralled in a store for stealing some candy bars, and the cop would not let you keep this child here till his mother come. They want to handcuff a 9-year-old child, put in a car, but he goes to the car car, and that police car's on flats. And when they bring the next police car up to take him, that car ends up on 4 flats as well. And then another police car comes, and that's on 4 flats 5 minutes later. That's when they say, look, this is too organized and too much for us. We got to move these guys out. And what they didn't realize that they could move me out or Ed out, but that wouldn't stop the struggle. And when people would pick it up and carry, somebody passed the baton to me. And my job is to pass the baton to someone else. And that's what we got to do for our young people.
Any questions and comments? And I'll get to you as fast as I can. Excuse me, man.
Hi, I'm Michelle Nickerson, and I teach at the University of Texas at Dallas. I teach American history, and I want to thank you for being here. This is fascinating. It makes me want to read more about this and do more of this kind of history. But hearing you talk, and especially hearing about the importance of coming to your awareness of what it meant to be a man, it really makes me curious about what women were doing in SNCC at this time. If the panelists or anyone else wants to answer that question,
I would like to just respond to it. Historically, black women, they held up half the sky for SNCC, and they played a tremendous role. There's a certain chauvinistic mentality that was a part of that we continue to try to struggle against, and I was a victim of that myself, but we continued to grow and struggle against it. And we even created parallel organizations where women began to organize themselves and begin to set their own agendas, like the Black Women's United Front here in Houston, here in Dallas. Where am I today? Different things like that. But there was a point where, at one point, where we went through this so-called African patriarchal notion of manliness, where a man is the king and the woman is his slave. You kiss my feet. We went through that stage. Where, to the point where they became equals, side by side, able to shoot, organize, lead, protect, defend, articulate, write, create, whatever needed to be done. So we came from a long way within the span of 5 years, from the early 60s to the time of the Panther Party, when they really integrated women to leadership positions and all. So that was a struggle continually going on. It still goes on today. We're not there yet. And there's the element of, of male dominance and women put down. In fact, I heard one of our leaders say sometime, when you asked about the position of the women in the movement, he said the position is the prone position. So we had those kind of ideas. Thank God, largely they have been defeated. And we see ourselves interchangeable, able to work. We have our own roles to play. And we all have something to contribute equally.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Edward. And
I guess
Mark.
when you ask that question, the first lady that comes to my mind is Ruth Jefferson. That's right. In West Dallas. See,
break it on.
I'm serious. When we went downtown, the guy he mentioned earlier, Quasi Williams, we had to go and get Quasi because he was ill at the time, and we had to go and make his money to get him out, and that was Ruth's boyfriend. And when Ruth Jefferson got there, it didn't matter what the attorney said, what the police were talking about, because they had him handcuffed in the cell, getting ready to brutalize. But we showed up fast. Ruth Jefferson went to the front of that crowd, and the officer told her to calm down and shut up and what he was going to do. And she said, you so-and-so, so-and-so. She said, open that door. She said, if you open that door, I'm going to give you the best whooping that you ever got. And this fool opened that door, and Ruth Jefferson bust him upside his head. And after the exchange, they brought him out, took those cuffs off, and put him in a cell like they were supposed to. But the National Welfare Rights, same thing, Ruth Jefferson.
Let's say one thing. We have some sisters in the audience may want to speak. Diane Ragsdale, Tab Baker,
Yeah, Diane Ragsdale's in the house.
You have some people that were part of that movement. They can speak for it better than we can.
I hate to give a mic to Diane. No, okay. But wait. Mark,
when she's on the council.
No, I'm gonna give it. But Mark, did you have something to say first?
I had such great admiration for Ruth and what she did, and I remember the time when we invited Pastor Herb Howard, who was the pastor of Park City's Baptist Church, big palatial Baptist church, and he got to meet Ruth. And it was quite an experience for Herb Howard. And that kind of a thing that was such an important breakthrough for Herb Howard to meet Ruth and to understand this was a real woman who had really something to say because he didn't expect it.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I'm from the East Coast. Now, SNCC, as I remember, my sister attended college in North Carolina, and SNCC in 62, 63 were doing sit-ins at Woolworths and all of that. I remember my mother praying that something would happen to my sister because she was trying to participate in SNCC back on the East Coast. How was it? It sounds so different here than what we were experiencing on the East Coast. We were doing a lot of sit-ins and beach ins and, you know, all those kind of ends. We were doing a lot of the ends in the Carolinas.
Well, I mean, SCLC was doing a lot of that.
What I said in the first place was that the experience of 30 years behind being a problem. And so you didn't have those kinds of things. I remember the one, and this is my great thing, this was about, I think, the first year I was in and there was a sit-in. Thank you. There was a thing down at the Piccadilly restaurant, and there was another Ernest, I can't remember his last name, who was from Bishop College and leading that sit-in. He asked me if I would do it, and I just said no, to my great regret. I wish I would have done that. And I say that because it was there, because Piccadilly restaurant was one that just fought against having any kind of a sit-in. And I just remember that, and that's
Why did you say no?
I think I was scared.
There's some
Frankly?
legitimate reasons.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Oh, I promised this lady, and then I'm coming back this way. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to respond to the history professor's concern about why you felt like you had to be a man. And I was thinking that all you have to do really is to go back to those history pages and show how the black man was degraded and why he was degraded and why there was fear of him having relationships with the white woman and how they would give jobs to the women and the men didn't have jobs, and the whole notion of their women folk being raped and they couldn't do anything about it. And so therefore that's why those were I can imagine, I know I'm not a man, but that feeling of degradation. And if you notice, they kept saying, we felt like we had to do something about it. We felt like we had to do something about it. And so just go back to those pages and revisit how they were done, and then you'd understand.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have, I'm a member of another organization, and I won't name that organization, but a bunch of our guys work with A. Maceo Smith, and they always tell the stories of standing in front of people stopping the ride. I don't know if they went down to Bonton or wherever it was, but one of them is down really sick right now, and it kind of brings to mind some of the things that some of the people have done. So have you guys got any stories about people stopping people from riding here in Dallas, which I've always said, Ed, on the other side of that, they should have rioted and burnt downtown Dallas down, and we'd all be better off right now. But go ahead.
We never.
Well, and speak to the black preacher who was often encouraged to keep black people in place.
Well, more than one.
Well, I mean,
One incident that really stands out. National Welfare Rights Organization, and I was just coming back from up north. And when I got back, you know, Ruth and the sisters had, you know, some brothers involved, and the women went in. You know, they pretty much led that demonstration downtown, right? At Health and Human Service, was it?
Yeah, it was on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And local ministers, you name them, we'll claim them, came in. I mean, they had organizations too. They said, "Oh, I know your women are down here." You know, when they took all their names down, said, "You know, we need to get your children to daycare, get you some food, take care of, you know, the kids while you down here protesting." So when the Marshal Service and the Sheriff's Department came back with warrants made out, some of Ruth and her buddies put on there, Minnie Mouse. Guess who the warrant was made out for? Minnie Mouse. I wonder how they got that name. And I'm not going to call them. Some of them are deceased now. But I don't have any hatred toward them, but, you know, there's some that exist like that today.
okay, I'm coming to you, ma'am, but you first.
Thank you so much for this platform and forum. I teach American history at Mountain View College, and I also teach it with an African American emphasis. And Ernie, you mentioned something about passing the baton. It was passed to you, you passed it to someone else, and now our youth. And what I find disturbing, and maybe you can speak to how we can address this, is that In class today, I asked my African American emphasis class, who can tell me what Jim Crow was? Not a one. And this is a class with Hispanic, Anglo students, but predominantly black students, and not a one could tell me what Jim Crow was. They did not know the state fair is coming up, and I said, did you know during the State Fair of Texas, there was one day out of the whole month that blacks could go Negro Day? You went for that one day, enjoyed the fair, and that was it for you. None of them knew that. So I think we're missing opportunity to teach our youth our history, and then to give them the empowerment to do something to fix the problems that we're dealing with now. What do you suggest we do? How do we address that lack of education?
Yeah. We have to resist being the sage on the stage with our kids. You know, preaching to them and telling them the answers and giving them the history as if we're the sole authority. I think the best way people learn is by doing and by practicing. And so having the hands-on experience will draw the questions and the intrigue and the curiosity about things more and more. And I'm not saying we have to go and do something. Wow, you can do something right in your neighborhood, painting a wall, picking up trash, or whatever. It could be what people refer to as community service. It can be an opportunity for learning, for developing some empathy for your neighborhood, for getting a sense of worth from helping others. So we've tried to do that in our agency in Houston, the Fifth Ward Enrichment Program, on a continuous basis, where we don't call it community service, we call it civic engagement, where we try to have our youth come together and talk about what's going on in their neighborhood and talk about solutions. And we have to resist the temptation to tell them the answers and to put our ego into the mix, but be able to, I think the most important thing we can give our kids, our youth today, is to listen to them and to help them see that they have a role as co-creators in this whole struggle. To be side by side and share, it's got to be a dynamic of giving and taking. So having youth councils or having leadership groups or opportunities for them to develop those skills come from doing practical activities and designing and learning through setting priorities and coming up with plans and even making mistakes, especially making mistakes, and then being able to draw from those mistakes and learn from it and move to the next level. We have a group of youth in Houston we call the Multicultural Youth Action Project. They call themselves Voices of the Future, and they have designed a program activity. They want to march on in the community to build better relation between the black and brown community. That's their next goal. I'm saying, look here, we need to think of this a little bit more carefully. Let's talk about this, because you might be perceived as marching on the community as an enemy. So we have to do some preliminary work. So they welcome advice and they welcome feedback, but you have to let them do and help them to know that you're there fully supported and help them to draw the skills from so they can go on. That's the way I think we have been able to find little bitty steps to building this baton passing or flame passing, whatever you want to call it, work going on in the community. But it really requires to put our little egos in our back seat and say, you know, we're adults, we know it, you just got to listen. We have to be able to have a dynamic relationship with our children more and rely more on experiential ways to learn. I like what South Dallas Cultural Center was doing in the graveyards. They're practicing history by looking at the tombstones. And my mother was a part of that, saying, this is the story behind it. So you're bringing that to life. And so there's so much creative in this room. I'm sure you can think of many more things that I can think of to apply to youth today.
And by the way, they did at least let us call it Negro Achievement Day at the fair. By the way, we're right at the time we're supposed to stop, but I've been given permission that I can go for about 8 more minutes, haven't I? Yeah. So this lady, I've got a gentleman over here, and one lady.
I think I heard someone ask a question, and I believe he said, did you try to stop riots? Did I hear that? Okay, that brought to my mind an occasion. We did actually stop a riot, but it was not by SNCC, it was not by the people in the community, it was by the police who set out to create a riot. And I remember I was at home one night with 2 of my daughters, and my phone rang, and it was Black Ed. And I was Mama. He said, Mama, we are surrounded, we are in West Dallas holding a meeting at a center here, and we were attempting to leave, but we're surrounded by police. And I said, well, do me a favor and don't go anywhere. And he said, yeah, you remember the Colonel report? I said, yes. You know, the Colonel was a report, it was a study, it was commissioned to be made, and the conclusion was that riots are started by police. So that's what came to my mind. So I hung up and I got on the phone. I called Reverend Herbener. I called Dr. Farmer at SMU. I called all the white influential people who were sympathetic to the cause. And I told them what was going on and asked them would they do what they could. They began to call other people. They called authorities. The first person I called was a chief of police downtown and told him, get those people out of West Dallas, because I said, you know what, if you can read, you know what the Colonel report said. So you get them out, because there's going to be a riot, and we're going to charge the police in Dallas with this riot, and called everybody, the sheriff department, everyone could think of, and then I called Washington, D.C., FBI, and everywhere else. And these people, whom my daughters, went next door to neighbors' home to use the phone, and they told the neighbors, and the neighbors were calling on the phone. And everybody half people in Dallas were calling. When I hang up a phone to make another call, my phone rang. They said, "This McMillan, SNCC is surrounded in West Dallas." And it went on and on like that. And for the next hour, we were busy. Everybody that, we could contact. And next thing I know, SNCC was home. And so what happened? They said the police drove off. So we knew then we had stopped a riot, and the police would probably have killed. The police probably would have killed half the SNCC members there too. Thank you, Barbara. I didn't mean to be that long.
Oh, you weren't long at all. Now, I mean, are you kin to somebody special here?
This is my son, Ernie McMillan.
I know it. How did you feel when he went to jail?
Oh, I felt awful, but I was kind of weary of him getting involved in SNCC at first, but once he started going to jail, my temper got, boiling over, and I became the champion fighter, for SNCC. and really, I quit my work and everything to be able to help them. So I was everybody's mama those days.
That's right, baby.
So they all my kids, and I love them madly.
And we love you. Thank you very much, Ms. McMillan. You know what? I'm going to take 4 more questions. I've already got them identified. This young man, that young man, that young man. Well, I'm going to take 5. Since you're...
Well, I just wanted to give a personal thanks to Ernie, because I heard him talking about how you listen to the young people and let them do things. My name is Akeem Funjo. I was one of the members of the Panther Party back during that time. And one of the things that Ernie taught me was humility, because when Ernie got out of prison and I met him, I was, oh man, Ernie McMillan, And one of the first things I saw Ernie do, this hero picked up a paintbrush and began painting the walls of the South Dallas Information Center. And more than that, Ernie would listen to me. I just got out of prison. And Ernie would listen to me. He would teach me as if I was, not a child. He would talk to me and I'm looking at him as a hero. And he would talk to me like I was equal to him. I don't know if anybody understands that, but when you're 20, 21, 22 years old, and here's a guy you've been hearing about, and you think is a real hero, and he's painting, got stuff tied around his head, laughing and talking like a natural human being. It kind of helped me in my organizing ability. And before I put this microphone down, I also want to speak. There's another hero of mine in here, brother now known as Khalif Hassan, because he taught me too, and I just wanted to mention his name because he was here.
See, y'all gonna make me lose weight today. I know, right? See, Oprah can't run this fast.
I'd like to also thank the panel for sharing with us tonight. But earlier, someone mentioned someone mentioned the preachers and how they tried to impede the movement, and you kind of broached over that. And from a historical perspective, Ernie, I'd like for you to address how Reverend Wright and Reverend Estelle tried to thwart the movement up to and including not recognizing Martin Luther King when he came to Dallas.
Okay, Ernie. Wait, no, yeah. Well, briefly, I mean, Reverend S.M. Wright.
You have to recognize my father as a minister, and we gave him hell. And we gave it now I regret some of the things I did, because at one point in my life, when he was at Interdenominational Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia, me and my boys from SNCC would vamp on the seminary. We'd attack all of them, including him, verbally, call them the worst names we could, Uncle Tom's to their face. And my dad would still welcome me, have a seat, sit down, so I'll feed you. So I'm taking it personally about the whole thing, because I think we can be intolerant ourselves, and we have a job to do. We can point fingers at someone else about how they did, but we got 4 fingers pointing back at ourselves for what we didn't do. So I think we need to look in the mirror more before we chastise everyone. Now, there's a certain thing about Christianity the theologian will share with us, I'm sure, that requires you to turn the other cheek, and that requires you to be patient and loving and kind, and to that's the New Testament, I think. The Old Testament may say something else, but even in the Quran, I'm sure there's that. But I'm just saying that I wouldn't take it all as a political conspiracy. We had those folks who were part of a phone web for the mayor. When anything went wrong, they would call them and trot them out, and they would do their duty, and they would get paid, and their job was to stifle or buffer the movement. But I'm saying there are some people who just moved because out of their heart they wanted to be peace loving, and I can't fault. There's a division in our community between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, but they to me represent a whole, not two. One is the enemy, one's good, and one is bad, but they represent the whole spectrum of our movement. We have to defend ourselves, but we have to turn the other cheek too. We have to back up. We have to express love and kindness toward our people. So there's values that we have to use them for ourselves, but I just want to take personal responsibility for our actions. Whatever we didn't do correctly, it was because of us. It wasn't because of Reverend Wright. It wasn't because of the city council. It was internal that held us back to where we are. I can't blame the weather for my looks or my color of my skin, and I can't blame the fault of where we have come today to Reverend Wright. It's because of what we didn't do well enough. Thank God the struggle continues.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I promised 2 other people, last 2, and then I'm going to give them one final sentence each.
Good evening. I'd like to say something. I'm a product of this generation. I went to school with both of these young men. And we used to sit and talk. And things that they would say would scare me. Just like Reverend said, it scares you to listen to them. I remember Ernie talking in the Student Union building about the shotgun and riding through the South with Stokely Carmichael. But the person that passed the baton on to me was my granddaddy, L.V. Baker, and he was a George. And I don't know if any of you know who Georges were. He was a Pullman porter. He served over 50 years on the railroad. A. Philip Randolph was his hero. And he told me the struggle started with them in the late 30s, early 40s, trying to get these AFL-CIOs and these unions and get equal rights. And I saw some of the end results, the class action suits that the Pullman porters were winning in the 60s when the violent struggle was starting with us. So my granddaddy preached to me about not being in the streets, but being at the table. And I think that's where we're missing a lot today. We're still angry at who we don't know, but we're not at the table with the power. And the ones that are at the table are not totally conscious about us that aren't. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fragmentation in our communities, and there are different reasons for it. But my granddad and Reverend Loud, who was part of the struggle of this accommodation for what was going on in the city of Dallas, preached to me to stay and to use your head and stay here. And with that, I didn't go through the struggles these men did. Still struggling today in different avenues. But I admire all of them and love them and glad to see them.
All right, thank you. One final one over here. Well, and actually, Diane, I'm going to let you say at least one word, so get ready.
This is Madan Goel. I've lived in the Dallas area about 31 years, so I didn't quite see the struggles you went through in the early 60s. But my question is that all the struggles you went through, what are your reflections today, what you see the results of your struggles in Dallas?
And actually, I'm going to say that because that was going to be my last question, actually. So keep that thought in mind and sum up with where Dallas is today. I mean, if your struggle paid off in terms of Dallas today. Diane?
Good evening to each of you. First of all, I just want to thank each of you for just really, thank you, Ernie, just what you guys have done in the past, present, and really what you're doing right now. And the only thing I want to say is that struggle continues, and what we have to do right here in this room is to pick up our struggle and bear our cross, if you will, and continue on with the struggle. Because oftentimes we act as if it's completely disappearing. So we have a tremendous responsibility right now, and that's my challenge right now, is to organize and work with others and the youth in particular to empower them to carry on this struggle.
Great. And briefly starting, amen. Briefly starting with you, Edward, and then Mark and Ernie summing up. Did your struggles pay off? Where's Dallas? Just briefly. Where's Dallas now?
I think we made a lot of progress. Okay. We made a lot of progress in this city. I guess I get frustrated a lot because I'm still, I'm retired from federal government and I do pretty good business-wise, so I could stay at home and just look at what goes on in this town on the news and be, content with that. But I refuse. There's nothing in my body and nothing that was instilled in me by this guy, this one, Mama Mack, Mary Green, Marilyn Clark, Diane Ragsdale, and the list goes on. Khalif Hassan, on and on. Thomas Muhammad. Because I remember when I met you all, we were all very young, but we all do something important in this community, and we just have to keep pushing that wedge forward and keep pushing it forward. Who wants normalcy? Normalcy means like status quo. To go along to get along. That's not going to change anything in South Dallas or West Dallas or Pleasant Grove or downtown. The city is changing, and it's changing fast. Politically, I don't know if we're going to make it. We stop grooming the leadership to pass that baton to. Until we get back to that, who's going to be selecting your leaders? I don't allow my kids or grandkids or their dates or their husband or anybody else to come in my house and you're not a registered voter, that you don't participate in the process. You don't know who represents you and you're paying them every month with your tax dollars. You're not welcome at my house. So everybody in here has a responsibility. Each one, teach one. You don't have to save all of them, just one. Thank you, Mary.
Do I need this? Do I need this?
Let me handle it anyway. The problem is so deeply theological, and I got to get that in. Right, Ernie? Theological. And the issue right now with the churches, and that's where I have to come from, the issue with the churches is twofold. The one issue is the churches that are saying outrageously unchristian things. The support for the war, the support for the wealthy, saying everything that is contrary to what Jesus taught. And the other is the problem with the churches who aren't saying anything. And you see, you've got a problem then who will speak for the poor? Who will speak for the people who are dying every day? Who will speak for the people who are being killed in countries in places where we have no business putting armies? And who will speak for the people who are building arms? I have to say this. There's something wrong with a world in which most of our wealth is coming through armaments. 40% of Fort Worth's economy is built on guns. Yeah, but it's true. And how much of ours, you can keep on going. It's a terrible thing, and we're doing it to ourselves. What is Pogo's line? I said it earlier to Edward. We have met the enemy, and he is us. And this is where the churches need to start listening to the cross, that Christ died. And when Christ died, it was at the hands of the wicked Roman government, at the hands of the oppressors. And, well, I'm not going to preach too long, Diane, because if I do, you'll carry on. So I'm about done, but you get the point, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Rev. Thank you, Black Ed. I don't know what's going on in Dallas. I'm here to learn, see what's happening. I'm encouraged by so much I see, though, that far as outweighs any downside about Dallas. And I just feel there's a great potential here for so much energy to be targeted toward good and toward change. I just hope we recognize that we're not fundamentally different from any city in the United States, that we're not so special that, we deserve something different or whatever, but we are a part of a world community, and we are in more ways than one, more now than a few years back, in the belly of a beast. And this beast has tentacles everywhere, and I'm just agonized over what's happening in the Gaza area, and what's happening in Iran and Iraq, and what's happening in Sudan. It's all over, and it's we're part of that. We each have a little part to play. There's this ribbon of activities from ecology to theology and economic development and politics and all that, but everybody has a little part to play in that fits into this web that we're trying to pull together. Thank you, Diane. And so I just hope that I can be a part of that in some way and be a part of more than anything in working with this next generation of our youth. They're not our enemy. We might treat them as we need curfews and they need to stop wearing their pants low and all those kind of things. But they were saying that about my generation, and every generation has something to contribute, and we need to find what they can contribute and tap into that.
Well, let me thank the Sixth Floor Museum, first of all, for sponsoring this whole series of events. Thanks to all of you for being here. This is a great reunion for me. I'm seeing all my old buddies and friends. But please, let's thank this great panel for their contribution tonight.